You might see a woman walking down the aisle with her husband, or a man charming a trail of women on the red carpet. But what we see isn't always the whole truth. Behind the headlines and picture-perfect moments, there are black stars who have loved both men and women, a reality only a few were brave enough to confront out loud. They shined under the spotlight, commanding stages, breaking records, shaping culture. Yet behind that polished image were complicated, deeply personal relationships that didn't always fit the narrative the world expected. In an industry and a society still shadowed by stigma and judgment, embracing their truth took courage most people can't even imagine. These are bisexual icons who fought tooth and nail to live authentically, refusing to let fear define them. The 23 stories you're about to hear aren't just celebrity gossip, they're powerful journeys of self-discovery, resilience, and heart. Stories of stars who stepped out from the shadows of expectation and chose to live boldly, honestly, and on their own terms. Are you ready to see them in a whole new light? Buckle up, because some of these names are about to completely blow your mind. Bessie Smith. Bessie Smith. The blues queen of wild nights hidden behind Harlem's golden glow. A name that thundered across early 20th century America as the Empress of the Blues. She didn't just sing. She owned every stage she stepped on, her voice so raw and blazing it left crowds breathless and trembling. Applause roared. Glasses clinked. And in a world that still tried to push black voices to the margins, Bessie stood tall, fierce, unapologetic, a living flame of the Harlem Renaissance. In 1923, she married Jack G. But no wedding band could cage a woman born to run free. Barely settled into married life, Bessie was back on the road, leading her troupe through dusty southern towns and glittering northern cities. Each night she closed the curtain on thunderous performances, then opened the door to after-hours revelry in Chicago's smoky clubs. Smooth-talking men circled. Laughter spilled into the early morning. But it was after midnight, when the music softened and the lights dimmed, that Bessie truly came alive. Lillian Simpson, a young dancer with pale skin and fearless eyes, followed Bessie from city to city like a secret melody. After the final encore, they would slip away to cramped rented rooms, doors locked tight, the faint pulse of jazz drifting up from the street below. In those hidden hours, away from prying eyes, Bessie found a different kind of harmony. By the late 1920s, Harlem's hush-hush clubs rolled out velvet ropes just for her. Inside, the air hung heavy with liquor, smoke, and temptation. Bessie clung to Lillian the way she held her whiskey, boldly, without apology, while Jack's jealous fury simmered outside. Once, he even hired someone to follow her, only to be met with a sharp slap when he dared confront the Empress herself. Songs like "Foolish Man Blues" poured from her lips, thick with defiance for any man who thought he could control her. Audiences felt the sting in every note. Backstage, she would rest her head in Lillian's lap, smiling at a society that tried, and failed, to dictate the rules of love. The world divided people by race and expectation. Bessie shattered both. Whispers later claimed that if a tragic accident in 1937 hadn't stolen her away, she might have turned Harlem into a kingdom of fearless desire and unfiltered truth. Her blues were never just songs. They were confessions. Dangerous. Alive. Echoes of secret nights the world pretended not to see, but could never forget. Ma Rainey. Ma Rainey. The mother of the blues, carrying a truth that dared to defy America itself. She didn't just sing the blues. She breathed life into it. Ma Rainey shaped the raw, unfiltered sound of black music as it thundered across the nation. They crowned her the mother of the blues because her voice didn't just entertain, it carved out space. It built a stage where generations of black artists could stand without bowing their heads. In 1928, she released "Prove It On Me Blues," not as a song, but as a statement. It hit like a challenge thrown straight at a society that policed women and punished black freedom. Ma didn't whisper her truth. She sang it loud. She wasn't afraid to love men. She wasn't afraid to love women. And she certainly wasn't afraid of who might be watching. Throughout the 1920s, she commanded Southern tent shows, surrounded by young dancers in daring outfits, moving close enough to stir rumors and raise eyebrows. But those who really understood knew the energy on that stage wasn't just performance, it was real. When the curtain dropped, the night was just beginning. Back at her home in Columbus, Georgia, the doors stayed open to friends and musicians. By daylight, it was welcoming. By night, it transformed. Liquor poured freely. The blues echoed through every wall. Bedroom doors closed and stayed closed. Her husband, Will Rainey, knew. And he chose silence. He understood one thing clearly: you didn't stand in Ma Rainey's way. She was immovable. When unexpected visitors knocked, she stood guard herself, making sure every trace of the night's rebellion disappeared before anyone stepped inside. Whispers followed her everywhere. Some said dancers stayed close to secure bigger roles. Others said they stayed because Ma's presence was magnetic. But Ma never hid. She never apologized. She turned her desire into art and her art into defiance. Through the roaring 20s and deep into the 30s, her Columbus home pulsed with laughter, perfume, cigarette smoke, and the burn of bootleg liquor. What happened inside stayed inside. And had she lived longer, that modest southern house might have become the most legendary gathering spot in the region. Ma Rainey understood society's rules. She just refused to live by them. To her, the blues was freedom. It was resistance wrapped in rhythm. Every note she left behind, especially "Prove It on Me" blues, stands as proof that she lived boldly, loved boldly, and sang truths most people didn't have the courage to speak. Josephine Baker. Josephine Baker. Paris's untamed icon, the woman who set the night on fire and dared the world to look away. She wasn't just a singer. She wasn't just a dancer. She was a revolution in motion, the dazzling face of the Harlem Renaissance who crossed an ocean and made Europe kneel at her feet. On the stages of the Folies Bergère, Josephine became a storm, a force of rhythm and defiance, shattering every expectation placed on a black woman in the 1920s. America tried to confine her with segregation and suffocating limits. So she left. And when she arrived in Paris, she didn't just perform, she conquered. Night after night, nearly nude, wrapped in nothing but confidence and a string of bananas at her hips, she teased, provoked, and electrified audiences who had never seen a woman command a stage with such fearless power. Men watched in awe. Women watched in wonder. And Josephine outshone them all. But the spotlight only told half the story. Behind the velvet curtains, her life pulsed just as fiercely. Artists, writers, aristocrats, they were drawn to her orbit. The legendary French writer Colette was captivated by her magnetism. In smoky underground clubs, Josephine moved freely through Paris's queer nightlife, unbothered by rigid labels or whispered judgment. She loved boldly, lived openly, and refused to shrink for anyone. In 1937, she married French industrialist Jean Lion, perhaps hoping to quiet the rumors. It didn't tame her spirit. Nothing could. Then came war. By the 1940s, Josephine traded sequins for a French military uniform. The same woman who once hypnotized crowds now used her charm for something far more dangerous. Traveling across Europe and North Africa, she gathered intelligence for the French resistance, slipping secrets across borders hidden in sheet music and invisible ink. Officers underestimated her. They shouldn't have. Her greatest weapon wasn't a gun. It was her presence, her laughter, her allure, her sharp mind behind those knowing eyes. She could disarm a room without ever raising her voice. If you thought Josephine Baker was only an entertainer, think again. She was a rule breaker, a freedom fighter, a woman decades ahead of her time. She bent Paris to her will and rewrote the script of what a woman could be. And had she lived even longer in that era of glittering rebellion, Paris might not have survived the brilliance of her flame. James Baldwin. James Baldwin. A black, bisexual writer who set both Paris and New York on fire. James Baldwin wasn't just an author. He was a voice that tore through the silence of a generation. With books like Giovanni's Room and Go Tell It on the Mountain, he didn't politely ask for attention. He demanded it. He hurled raw stories of love, race, desire, and brutal honesty straight into the world's face. If you were uncomfortable, that was the point. If you were afraid, you stepped aside. He never did. In the 1940s, Baldwin drifted through the smoky cafes of Greenwich Village, wrapped in cigarette haze and restless ambition. He'd be spotted with his arm around a white lover, laughing too loud at a corner table, or leaning in close with a fellow woman writer, sharing secrets the world wasn't ready to hear. Desks became beds. Cafes became sanctuaries. New York wasn't built for that kind of truth, but Baldwin refused to shrink. America's unspoken rules were suffocating black lives, and even the so-called progressives were living double lives. By the early 1950s, Baldwin had enough. He packed a single suitcase and left for Paris. Paris, cold and gray, offered him a different kind of warmth. In its late-night bars and narrow staircases, in fleeting romances and endless conversations, he found space to breathe. Paris became his stage, and Baldwin performed without limits. When Giovanni's Room was published in 1956, it landed like a thunderclap. Many wanted him silent. Instead, he spoke louder. Readers sensed the truth pulsing beneath every sentence. This wasn't distant fiction, it was lived experience. Paris was still damp with rain and possibility. Love was messy. Nights blurred into alcohol and arguments. Whispers followed him. Even parts of the black community, bound by their own rigid expectations, watched him with wary eyes. But Baldwin never retreated. He poured every heartbreak, every fight, every ounce of desire and rage into his pages. He would argue all night, love fiercely, walk home at dawn, and then write. Again and again. If he hadn't lived so boldly, no one would have believed that a black, bisexual man could hold a pen and expose the ugliest truths of America with such precision and fire. And had he not died in 1987, you can almost imagine him still somewhere in Paris, half smiling, watching the world struggle with truths he had already spoken decades before. Audre Lorde. Audre Lorde. A black poet, a truth teller, a woman who chose to live out loud. In the heart of America's feminist movement, Audre Lorde didn't just write poetry, she lived it. She cracked open every silence society tried to seal shut. From Zami, a new spelling of my name to Sister Outsider, her words weren't whispers. They were declarations. In the 1960s, Harlem hummed with creative fire. In rooms thick with coffee, cigarette smoke, and revolution, Lorde stood among black writers and refused to shrink herself. She spoke of love, of identity, of the complicated beauty of being fully human. She loved Francis Clayton deeply. She remained connected to Edwin Rollins, the father of her children. Her life didn't fit neatly into boxes, and she never pretended it did. She didn't hide. She didn't apologize. By the early 1970s, as black feminism found its voice, Lorde stepped forward as openly bisexual. And she didn't just announce it, she wrote it, raw and unfiltered, turning private truths into public power. Zami wasn't just a memoir. It was testimony. It was courage bound in pages. In university lecture halls throughout the 1980s, she made one thing unmistakably clear. A black woman has the right to define herself, to love who she loves, without seeking permission from the world. At night, she returned home to a life built on honesty, not secrecy. No locked doors. No double lives. Just truth. People would later say that if Audre hadn't spoken first, many would have stayed silent forever. If she were here today, she'd still be commanding stages, reciting poems about radical love, the loneliness of the marginalized, and the fierce strength found in difference. She didn't just leave behind books. She left behind a blueprint for fearless living. Audre Lorde reminded us that love is not something to hide. It is something to honor. Her words became a sanctuary, a vault thrown open, where the truths others were too afraid to speak could finally breathe in the light. Alice Walker. Alice Walker. A black writer whose fearless love reshaped American literature. She wasn't just the author of The Color Purple, she was a force. With every sentence, she dug up truths people had tried to bury. The Pulitzer Prize was historic, yes, but awards were never the point. What truly shook the culture was the way Alice lived, boldly, unapologetically, and in full view. In the 1970s, she immersed herself in San Francisco's civil rights and feminist movements. Workshops, book launches, poetry readings. Alice was there, electric and unafraid, often with a lover by her side. Sometimes a brilliant male thinker. Other times, a woman who would slip out with her long after the crowd had gone home. And Alice never blinked at the whispers. When The Color Purple hit shelves in 1982, it did more than tell a story, it detonated a conversation. The love between Celie and Shug Avery landed in a society that wasn't ready to face itself. Readers felt the intimacy, the defiance, the truth. Because Alice wasn't imagining freedom, she was living it. By the mid-80s, the literary world buzzed again with rumors of a romance between Walker and singer Tracy Chapman, whose haunting voice had captivated America. Alice didn't hide. In interviews, she spoke plainly about loving women, loving men, loving whoever moved her spirit. By 1990, she publicly embraced her bisexuality. Some were stunned. Some thought it was performance. But Alice's life was even braver than her prose. At dimly lit San Francisco gatherings, heavy with wine and revolution, Tracy was often nearby. Alice at the center. Love her close. No apologies. If you thought The Color Purple was just a novel, you missed it. It was a mirror, a confession, a declaration. Had Alice Walker chosen silence, American literature might have lost its sharpest edge. But she didn't stay quiet. She wrote. She loved. She lived out loud. Alice Walker never feared scandal. She understood something powerful, that as long as she kept writing and loving without shame, the world would be forced to examine itself, instead of judging her. Storm DeLarverie. Storm DeLarverie. An American drag legend. The spark behind the Stonewall uprising that shattered the barriers strangling love. Storm wasn't just a performer. She was the line in the sand, the turning point between an era ruled by fear and a future fueled by freedom for the LGBTQ+ community. From the stage of the Jewel Box Revue to the streets of Greenwich Village in 1969, Storm became untouchable. In the 1950s, she stepped into the spotlight in razor-sharp suits, crisp ties, and slicked-back hair. New York audiences couldn't look away. The Jewel Box Revue wasn't just selling drag shows, it was selling liberation. Storm wasn't background noise. She commanded the room, gender-defying, magnetic, captivating men and women alike. Anyone who saw her perform knew the night was bigger than music and applause. People walked out changed, inspired, realizing they, too, could live openly and unapologetically. By the 1960s, Storm was still unstoppable. She loved freely, lived boldly. No apologies, no explanations. If you wanted to find her, you went to Greenwich Village. She was there, at the gay bars, beer in hand, laughing, arms wrapped around whoever she chose. One night it might be a stunning woman. Another night, a fearless man. She moved through the city like she owned her truth. Then came 1969, the Stonewall Uprising. And the question that still echoes, who threw the first punch? Many in the crowd pointed to Storm. They said she fought back against the police. And whether history can prove it or not, one thing is certain. After that night, her name became legend. The LGBTQ+ movement ignited, and Storm's fire burned at its center. But she didn't disappear after the riots. In the 1970s, she still roamed the village, hand in hand with lovers, a living reminder that loving who you want is not a privilege, it's a right. Those who lived through her era believe this. Without Storm, many might never have found the courage to stand up to police batons and brutality. Had she been younger, some say, she might have sparked even more revolutions. She left behind one undeniable truth. Drag stages were never just entertainment. They were resistance. They were armor. They were weapons. And Storm kept that fire alive. For everyone who dared to love without asking permission. Michelle Indigiocello. Michelle Indigiocello. A black bassist who didn't just play music, she shattered boundaries with every note. Michelle Indigiocello stands among the greatest bassists of her generation. Blending soul, jazz, and funk into something fiercely her own, she poured raw, unfiltered love stories straight into her lyrics. Albums like Plantation Lullabies and Peace Beyond Passion proved she was never afraid to drag her private truths into the spotlight and let them breathe under stage lights. In the 1990s, she began stirring up New York City. Night after night, beneath the low glow of downtown jazz clubs, she stood with her bass hanging low, her voice soft but heavy with meaning. The crowd didn't just listen, they leaned in. Michelle didn't hide. People knew she loved men. But some nights, her songs lingered on a woman in the audience, catching her eye, smiling back. And in those moments, the room understood. This was honesty in its purest form. When Peace Beyond Passion dropped in 1996, it felt like a sudden stop that forced everyone to pay attention. Michelle held nothing back. She sang openly about same-sex love. No code, no disguise, no apology. Her desires, her doubts, her devotion, all of it spilled into the melodies. By the 2000s, she pushed even further, collaborating with artists like Madonna and continuing to challenge what pop and soul music could dare to say. Every track she touched carried a pulse you couldn't mistake for anyone else's. Fans loved her fiercely. Critics watched closely. Everyone was curious. Her shows filled up fast, crowds pressing shoulder to shoulder to hear her weave the complicated threads of love through deep, hypnotic bass lines. She never hid who inspired her songs or who lit up her late-night thoughts. For LGBTQ+ listeners, Michelle wasn't just an artist, she was armor. She gave people language, space, and courage. Even if she had never picked up a bass, she would have found another way to speak her truth. But on stage, under warm golden lights, her bass cut clean through expectations about gender and love. And as long as she keeps playing, those rooms will stay full, because truth like hers refuses to whisper. It demands to be heard. Patrickian Polk. Patrickian Polk. A black director who looked Hollywood straight in the eye and refused to blink. Patrickian Polk, filmmaker, director, screenwriter, would not let the stories of black gay and bisexual men stay buried in the shadows. With Punks and later Noah's Ark, he didn't just create entertainment, he created visibility. Polk used the screen like a spotlight, ripping through Hollywood's polished, fake moral facade and exposing the truth it tried so hard to hide. In the late 90s, as a young writer in Los Angeles, he was a familiar face at black LGBTQ+ gatherings, vibrant, loud, unapologetic spaces filled with music and freedom. He never toned himself down. One hand holding a drink, the other wrapped around someone he loved. Sometimes a man, sometimes a woman. No whispers. No shame. No secrets. He understood the cost of living openly bisexual in an industry that preferred silence. But silence was never his language. When Punks hit screens in 2000, it felt like a wake-up call, a bold reminder that black gay lives weren't invisible. The film didn't flinch from intimacy, conflict, or desire. It showed love and vulnerability without asking permission, daring critics to look away if they couldn't handle the truth. Then came Noah's Ark, the first television series to center the real, messy, beautiful lives of black gay men. The friendships, the jealousy, the breakups, the makeups, it was honest, tender, and groundbreaking. For many viewers, it was the first time they saw themselves fully reflected on screen. Polk even graced the cover of Out magazine, openly declaring his bisexuality and making it clear no one else would control his narrative. At premieres and screenings, he sat proudly in the front row, his partner by his side. Afterward, he'd walk out hand in hand, visible, fearless, real. Every project he touched pulled hidden lives into the light. He didn't just make films. He dismantled barriers. He cut the ropes that kept love restrained and said, boldly and clearly, that it deserved to exist in its rawest form, whether Hollywood approved or not. Roxane Gay. Roxane Gay. A black writer who refuses to shrink. A cultural force who tears down norms while standing fully, unapologetically, in her identity and her boundless capacity to love. A celebrated author, sharp-tongued critic, and fearless feminist voice, she didn't just join conversations about race, gender, and black identity, she disrupted them. With Bad Feminist and Hunger, she carried her truth from the page to the stage, daring audiences to sit with discomfort instead of running from it. In the 2000s, at literary panels in New York and Chicago, Roxane began telling stories others were too afraid to touch. She spoke calmly, almost gently, but her words landed with the force of a reckoning. Rooms would fall silent. People shifted in their seats. She made them look directly at what they'd rather avoid. She never hid who she loved. One evening, she might arrive at a cafe with a short-haired woman, fingers intertwined. Months later, she'd be seen wrapped in quiet laughter beside a male professor. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. Loving men or women wasn't a statement, it was simply her truth. And to Roxanne, truth is meant to be spoken, not softened. By the 2010s, hunger cracked open every door. She wrote about her body, her trauma, her survival. She peeled back the layers of shame placed on Black women and exposed the raw humanity underneath. Standing before hundreds of university students, she didn't deliver safe, polished lectures. She spoke plainly about love, about gender, about the radical act of choosing your own life. That kind of honesty is contagious. It gave others permission to speak, to confess, to exist without apology. People whispered, they questioned, they judged. But the louder the whispers grew, the louder Roxanne Gay's name echoed in response. She pressed on society's bruises until it felt them. Her life became a mirror, and not everyone liked what they saw. Still, every attempt to silence her failed. She kept writing, kept standing under bright lights, kept insisting that no Black woman should ever again be forced into silence. And in doing so, she didn't just tell her story. She changed the conversation. Angelica Ross. Angelica Ross. A trans woman who refuses to live inside anyone else's limits. Bold in her love. Fearless in her truth. A groundbreaking Black trans actress and the founder of trans tech social enterprises, she didn't just enter the tech world, she carved out space for trans people to thrive in it. From Pose to American Horror Story, she made one thing clear: no one can silence a community that's done being pushed to the margins. Long before Hollywood knew her name, Angelica was out in Chicago in the early 2000s, moving with confidence, building connections, and living unapologetically. She was a familiar face at LGBTQ+ gatherings, not as a celebrity, but as a relentless activist with a vision. She didn't just speak about rights. She lived them. She showed up at bars, joined support circles, organized in tech spaces, and built bold, honest relationships with both trans and non-trans partners. She never hid. She never shrank herself to make others comfortable. Then in 2016, her story hit the airwaves, and everything changed. Angelica became a phenomenon. On camera, she openly shared her attraction to both men and women, regardless of gender. Some were surprised. Some were uncomfortable. Angelica? She didn't flinch. To her, love has no borders. If you agreed, you nodded. If you didn't, you stepped aside. By 2018, when she lit up the screen as Candy Ferocity on Pose, Angelica brought Black trans stories front and center, right into Hollywood's spotlight. Off-screen, she lived the same way she performed: free, fierce, and unapologetic. Whether at parties, tech conferences, or activist events, she stood tall with partners and friends of every gender, her personal life reflecting the power of her roles. Some called her reckless. Maybe. But that so-called recklessness became liberation for thousands watching from the shadows. Her fearless love challenged outdated beliefs and gave others permission to exist fully. Angelica Ross isn't just an actress. She's proof that being trans, bisexual, and Black isn't a limitation, it's power. And no cage built by prejudice is strong enough to hold someone determined to rise. Lena Waithe. Lena Waithe. A rare force in Hollywood, a fearless storyteller who refused to let Black LGBTQ+ voices stay in the shadows. Screenwriter, actress, producer, Lena Waithe didn't just enter the industry, she disrupted it. At a time when mainstream television barely made room for queer Black stories, she kicked the door wide open. She made history with her Emmy win for Master of None, and then went even further by creating The Chi, a raw, unfiltered look into the layered realities of Chicago's Black community. When Master of None began gaining buzz in 2014, Lena could have played it safe. Many in her position did. She didn't. Instead, she spoke openly about her bisexuality, sharing that she had been attracted to both men and women since childhood. No hedging. No PR spin. Just truth. Her honesty caught Hollywood off guard, but Lena wasn't interested in making anyone comfortable. She showed up everywhere as her full self. Red carpets, industry events, intimate gatherings. One day with a boyfriend, another day with a girlfriend, completely unfazed by whispers or side eyes. While others hid behind carefully curated images, Lena lived out loud. By the time the Chi premiered in 2018, her real-life courage was woven into every frame. The characters loved boldly, broke rules, and refused to shrink under scrutiny. Art mirrored life, and life fueled the art. At the GLAAD Media Awards, Lena didn't just give speeches, she stood as living proof. Proof that authenticity isn't a trend. It's power. Offstage, she wore no mask. Those who assumed she was chasing attention misunderstood her completely. This wasn't branding. It was identity. Through her scripts, her voice, and her presence, Lena Waithe sent a clear message to Hollywood. Black LGBTQ+ people don't need permission to exist, to love, or to lead. And as long as voices like hers keep rising, no system, no matter how entrenched, can silence the truth. Janelle Monáe. A rebel icon. A rule breaker. A force that refuses to fit inside anyone's box. Singer. Actress. Songwriter. Visionary. From the electrifying world of Dirty Computer to unforgettable roles in Moonlight and Hidden Figures, she didn't just rise to fame, she detonated into it. And with every step, she made one thing clear: creativity has no limits, and neither does love. In 2018, she sent shockwaves through Hollywood when she told Rolling Stone that she identified as bisexual and pansexual. For some, it was headline news. For those who truly knew her journey, it was simply the truth catching up to her courage. Long before the spotlight blazed this bright, she was moving through Atlanta's underground scene in the 2000s, fearless, fluid, falling in love with souls, not genders. Those who saw her in late-night clubs say she laughed in the face of labels. And when Dirty Computer dropped, Make Me Feel wasn't just a song, it was a declaration. Bold, electric, unapologetic. It silenced anyone who thought her identity was just an act. Throughout the 2010s, she was linked to lovers, some known, some not, each relationship challenging old, dusty boundaries that society still clings to. But Janelle wasn't living for whispers. She was living out loud. She didn't just make music. She didn't just act. She made the world confront a simple, powerful truth. It's not about who you love. It's about having the courage to love and live as your truest self. Raven-Symoné, the Disney darling who grew up and rewrote her own story. With breakout hits like That's So Raven and the girl power phenomenon The Cheetah Girls, she wasn't just a star, she was a cultural force. At a time when few black teen actresses dominated primetime TV, Raven shined brighter than most, becoming the face of a generation. But behind that infectious laugh and picture-perfect Disney image was a private truth she guarded closely. Throughout the 2000s, while she was filming nonstop, touring the world, and flashing that signature smile for the cameras, she was also quietly navigating her identity. Away from the spotlight, in tucked-away corners of Los Angeles, she confided in a trusted circle about her love for women, long before the world was ready to hear it. Then in 2013, she made it clear she wasn't hiding anymore. With one bold message on Twitter, she shut down the rumors and declared she would love who she loves. No labels, no fear, just truth. And when she sat down on The View in 2014, she spoke with confidence and clarity about living authentically. Today, Raven-Symoné isn't just a former Disney star. She's a symbol of growth, courage, and self-definition, a powerful voice for Black youth and anyone struggling to embrace who they truly are. The once perfect Disney kid has evolved into something even stronger, a living reminder that freedom begins the moment you choose to be yourself. Frank Ocean. Not just a name, a movement. Frank Ocean didn't simply make music. He rewrote the rules. In a genre that often tiptoed around vulnerability, he made it the headline. Through albums like Channel Orange and Blonde, he didn't just drop songs. He shifted culture. His sound was raw, intimate, and fearless, demanding the world not just listen but feel. But what truly sealed his legacy wasn't just the music, it was his courage. In 2012, in a deeply personal Tumblr letter, Frank Ocean came out as bisexual. No press tour. No spectacle. Just honesty. He shared the story of his first love, a man, and in doing so, cracked open an industry long wrapped in silence and stigma. It wasn't a publicity move. It was a declaration of truth. Back in the early 2010s, while creating with Odd Future in Los Angeles, he stood firm in who he was, openly acknowledging his attraction to both men and women at a time when few artists dared to. And when Thinkin' 'Bout You hit the airwaves, it wasn't just another hit record. It was love without boundaries. A song that refused to shrink itself to fit expectations. From festival stages like Coachella to sold-out arenas worldwide, he performed with quiet confidence, never loud, never forced, just unapologetically himself. Frank Ocean didn't just influence music. He liberated it. He gave artists permission to be honest. He gave fans permission to be seen. And for LGBTQ youth searching for reflection in the spotlight, he became proof that authenticity isn't weakness, it's power. From defying prejudice to becoming an icon of fearless, unapologetic love. A South African singer, songwriter, actor, and author, he shattered expectations with projects like You Will Not Die and the groundbreaking film The Wound. Through every lyric, every scene, he proved that art isn't just expression, it's rebellion. It's survival. It's truth. Then in 2015, in a South Africa still wrestling with deep-rooted prejudice, Nikane did something even more powerful than perform. He revealed himself. When The Wound hit the screen, he publicly came out as bisexual, sending shockwaves through a society still clinging to rigid ideas about gender and love. The film wasn't just cinema. It was confrontation. It challenged tradition. It questioned silence. And Nikane didn't stop there. His music became a continuation of that fight. Tracks from You Will Not Die, especially Clairvoyant, weren't just songs, they were declarations. Love without limits. Identity without apology. On stages in Johannesburg and beyond, he sang with fearless intensity, refusing to shrink, refusing to hide. He spoke openly about loving both men and women in a country quick to judge and slow to understand. That raw honesty transformed him into more than an artist. He became a symbol of freedom, of courage, of possibility. For countless African LGBTQ youth searching for light, Nikane became that spark. Keenan Lonsdale, the Flash star who became more than a superhero on screen, emerged as a fearless voice for free love in real life. Known to many as Wally West on The Flash and for his breakout role in Love, Simon, he's not just an actor. He's a singer, a dancer, and a trailblazer who refuses to let the world define how love should look. With his album Rainbow Boy and the unapologetic anthem Kiss the Boy, Keenan shattered expectations and rewrote the rules. In 2017, he stunned fans in the most powerful way, coming out as bisexual on Instagram, openly declaring his love for both men and women and choosing to live his truth without fear. While filming The Flash in Vancouver, he embraced the LGBTQ+ community, showing up, speaking out, and celebrating love in all its forms. From Sydney to Los Angeles, he didn't just capture attention with his talent, he became a symbol of authenticity. Kiss the Boy wasn't just a song. It was a statement. A bold reminder that love doesn't need society's permission, it only needs courage. Tinashe, a rare star who dared to love out loud. A gifted singer, songwriter, and dancer with Zimbabwean roots, she set the music world on fire with hits like Two On and the critically acclaimed songs For You. But beyond the spotlight and the chart success was a story even more powerful, one of fearless, unapologetic love. In 2018, at the height of her fame, Tinashe stepped into her truth and openly embraced her identity as a bisexual woman, making it clear that her heart doesn't recognize boundaries of gender. In an industry where image is everything and silence often feels safer, that kind of honesty took real courage. Throughout the 2010s, as she toured across the globe, she didn't just command the stage, she became a symbol. Speaking candidly about loving both men and women, she helped spark necessary conversations in pop and R&B spaces. Her visuals, especially in Company, celebrated freedom, sensuality, and connection without shame or labels. Not everyone applauded, but Tinashe never dimmed her light. She performed louder, prouder, and more fearless than ever. Her journey has inspired millions, especially within Black and LGBTQ+ communities, proving that authenticity is power and that love, in its truest form, will always outshine prejudice. Taylor Bennett. Not just Chance the Rapper's little brother, but a voice that refused to be silenced. Taylor Bennett carved his own lane in modern hip-hop with projects like Broad Shoulders and Be Yourself, proving his talent stood on its own. But in 2017, he did something even bolder than dropping bars. He told the world he was bisexual. In a genre long shadowed by rigid expectations and quiet prejudice, Taylor chose honesty over comfort. Around the release of his Be Yourself mixtape, his music became more than rhythm and rhyme. It became testimony. Performing in Chicago clubs throughout the 2010s, he stood confidently beside both his male and female partners, unapologetic and unafraid of judgment. Be Yourself wasn't just a track. It was a declaration, a movement, a challenge to a culture that often demanded silence. Taylor Bennett didn't just come out, he showed up. And in doing so, he helped reshape hip-hop's conversation about identity, inspiring young Black artists everywhere to live loud, love freely, and stand proud against every odds stacked against them. Amandla Stenberg. A career rising, unapologetic and fearless. Amandla Stenberg first captured hearts as Rue in The Hunger Games and later mesmerized audiences in Everything, Everything. But her impact has reached far beyond the screen. She didn't just become a talented young actress. She became a voice, a movement, a symbol of courage for a new generation. In 2016, she came out as bisexual in a candid video for Teen Vogue, speaking with a vulnerability and confidence that shattered expectations. Still a teenager, she broke barriers and touched millions, showing young people, especially young Black youth, that living your truth is a powerful act of resistance. Amandla didn't stay silent when it mattered most. She stood boldly at Black Lives Matter events in Los Angeles, speaking out for justice, equality, and Black empowerment. Her activism wasn't performative, it was personal. Whether loving openly, embracing her identity, or challenging injustice, she lived her truth without apology. And when she starred in The Hate U Give, it wasn't just another role. It was a statement, a declaration that art and activism can stand side by side. It's no surprise she became a beacon for Black youth everywhere, inspiring them to embrace who they are, love who they love, and speak their truth out loud. Willow Smith. Not just Will Smith's daughter, but a voice, a vision, and a generation's reflection of fearless self-expression. The vibrant child of Will and Jada Pinkett Smith, Willow Smith has grown far beyond her early spotlight. She's a singer, an actress, and a bold symbol of progressive thought. In 2019, during an open and heartfelt moment on her mother's Red Table Talk, she came out as bisexual, speaking with calm confidence about loving both men and women without limits or labels. She's no longer the little girl from I Am Legend or the unforgettable Whip My Hair kid. Willow has evolved into an icon for young people searching for authenticity, in love, identity, and self-expression. Growing up in one of Hollywood's most famous families meant living under a microscope, but instead of shrinking, she expanded. Throughout the 2010s, she embraced her individuality unapologetically. From music festivals like Afropunk to her genre-bending sound, from gender-fluid fashion to openly embracing unconventional relationships, Willow made one thing clear: freedom is her language. And if 2015 proved anything, it was this: she was never afraid to claim her space online or in real life. She shared her journey openly, creating room for Gen Z to have honest conversations about gender, love, and what it truly means to be yourself. Dreamdoll. From her explosive debut on Bad Girls Club to dropping unapologetic anthems that celebrate bisexual identity, Dreamdoll has always done things her way. She first caught the world's attention with her fiery, controversial presence on Bad Girls Club, but she didn't stop there. She turned reality TV fame into a bold hip-hop career, bringing that same fearless energy into every track she touches. Hailing from New York, Dreamdoll built her name on confidence, charisma, and a no-holds-barred style. Songs like Ah and Splish Splash showcase her edgy flow and unapologetic vibe. But what truly sets her apart isn't just the music, it's her honesty. From day one, she's never hidden who she loves. Men or women, she's embraced her truth publicly, boldly, and without compromise. Then in 2021, during Pride Month, she shook social media once again by openly declaring her bisexuality on Instagram. It wasn't just a headline, it was a statement. Dream Doll isn't just making tracks, she's making space. She's creating visibility, representation, and empowerment within the LGBTQ+ community. Her confidence, resilience, and refusal to be boxed in have turned her into more than a rapper. She's become a symbol of living freely and loving openly. So after hearing this, has your perspective changed? Behind the flashing lights and viral moments, there's always a deeper story, a fight to live authentically in an industry that often demands perfection and silence. That kind of courage deserves recognition. If you're surprised, inspired, or just want to uncover more of the untold stories behind your favorite celebrities, drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because we're just getting started uncovering the real stories behind the spotlight.